pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1805 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. This episode is brought to you by Legacy Staffs, which are crafted by the Brazos Walking Stick Company out there in beautiful Waco, Texas. You can go to brazosticks.com and use my name, Mac Payne, one word, at the checkout and get a whopping 10% discount off your next order of the Legacy Staff or cane of your own design. I highly encourage you to take advantage of this offer. You never know when it will be withdrawn. I have one of these Legacy Staffs, crafted by the artisans out of the Brazos Walking Stick Company, and it is one of my most prized possessions. It is an amazing thing. I discovered that it was true when it was written in the Bible that even though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you will be comforted by a staff. My Legacy Staff, which remains right next to me at my desk, comforts me. It is amazing. I highly encourage you to go out to brazosticks.com and get your Legacy Staff and make sure you use my name at the checkout so you can get that 10% discount. Don't delay. Do it just as soon as this episode is over with. I highly encourage you to listen to this next episode because it has to do with the ongoing tensions between Vietnam and China. Being a Vietnam veteran, for some reason, I have an undying interest in the country of Vietnam. Even though the northern part of that country was our enemy in the American Vietnam War. I like those Vietnamese. They're good people. They're cheerful, hardworking, industrious. They never give up. That's why I like to stay up on what's happening over there. As you know from previous episodes in this podcast, China is leaning on little Vietnam down there, trying to push them around. They want to take over the entire South China Sea. It's not right, according to the lawyers. There was a story on a blog site. I'd like to share portions of it with you to give you an update on what's happening. Title of the story is, Vietnam Threatens China with Litigation Over the South China Sea. That means Vietnam's going to take them to court. The blog post I'm sharing with you was written by Peter A. Dutton. Peter is no lightweight. He is a professor of strategic studies in the China Maritime Studies Institute at the US Naval War College. He is a retired Navy judge advocate and former Naval Flight Officer. He holds a J.D. degree from the College of William and Mary and a Ph.D. from King's College, London. He is an Adjunct Professor of Law at NYU School of Law, Senior Research Fellow at the US Asian Law Institute, and Associate in Research at Harvard University's Fairbank Center for China Studies. As you can see, Peter Dutton is no lightweight. He is probably one of the more renowned authorities on the situation going on over there now. Now you know why I am sharing part of his blog post with you, to help clear the fog away from the real situation over there in Southeast Asia. Again, speaking as a Vietnam veteran, and I'm sure this opinion is shared by all the other Vietnam veterans, we don't want to get involved in another war over there in Southeast Asia involving Vietnam and China. That's why we need to stay up on it. Keep a close eye on it. Let's take a look at what Peter Dutton has to say about this. Now, keep in mind, Peter says that the views that he expresses in his blog post are his own and do not reflect the official views of the U.S. Navy or any other agency of the U.S. government. That's your standard boilerplate denial of any liability here. Regardless, let's take a look at what he has to say. Dateline, Washington, D.C. Vietnam and China have sparred over competing claims in the South China Sea for nearly 50 years. But for the first time in November 2019, Vietnamese officials publicly issued threats to initiate international legal proceedings against China, similar to the Philippine case that ended in 2016. Since November, there have been further indications that the Vietnamese government is quite serious, despite the limited success enjoyed by the Philippines when it invoked the law. In this post, Peter Dutton will address two questions on this issue. Number one, what motivates the Vietnamese government to consider this step at this time? And number two, what can Vietnam gain? For starters, at stake are development rights for the oil and gas reserves under Vietnam's continental shelf. While the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea allocates resource rights in the water and under the seabed to Vietnam out to at least 200 nautical miles from Vietnam shores, China stakes a historic rights claim to much of the same resources through its 9-dash line. If you'd like to see where the 9-dash line is, go to episode 1805 of this podcast at the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com, and you will see it. The area within the 9-dash line that China claims takes up almost the entire South China Sea. Continuing. This line encompasses about 80% of the South China Sea, but has already been formally invalidated once by the arbitrators in the Philippine case. Despite its loss in court, China did not abandon its claim. Throughout 2019, Chinese government vessels harassed Vietnamese hydrocarbon survey efforts in an especially rich undersea region known as Vanguard Bank, which you will notice in that map shown in episode 1804. The Vanguard Bank sits south of Vietnam. China has a big set of stones to claim something that far away from China and so close to Vietnam. Continuing. Under the joint venture between Rosneft and Petro-Vietnam, an exploratory drilling rig began operating in the area in July 2019. China then sent its own survey vessels under heavy Coast Guard escort to demonstrate its claim. Further north in 2011, ExxonMobil and Petro-Vietnam discovered commercially significant oil and gas deposits in Vietnam's Block 118. The Blue Whale gas field, the area these two companies are trying to develop, lies only 50 miles off Vietnam's coast but straddles the vast area claimed by China. A final go-ahead decision is expected sometime this year, and gaining clarity over its legal rights to resources in the region may be a key reason for Vietnam to arbitrate. Also at stake are fishing rights in Vietnam's 200-mile exclusive economic zone and in the waters off the disputed Paracel Islands. The Vietnamese government defies annual Chinese fishing bans that attempt to control and curb Vietnamese fishing activities in the area that overlap with China's 9-dash line. Arbitration in this area would clarify legal rights to the resources and deflect some of the domestic pressure to protect Vietnamese fishermen. Domestic resentment is a force that must be managed carefully, since in 2014, at the height of a dispute over Chinese oil rig HYSY 981, the Vietnamese people conducted anti-Chinese riots, assaulted Vietnamese in Vietnam, and vandalized Chinese commercial interests. If you remember those activities back in 2014, I would characterize them more than just anti-China riots. those Vietnamese people were riled up and just about eliminated the Chinese in Vietnam. Again, speaking as a Vietnam veteran, you don't want to mess with the Vietnamese. Continuing. Finally, as noted above, Vietnam disputes Chinese ownership of the Paracel Islands, a group of small but strategically important features that lie between the Vietnamese coast and China's Hainan Island. The islands have long been claimed by Vietnam, but Chinese forces first occupied features in the Paracels in 1955 in the wake of Vietnam's war for independence against France. In 1974, China fought a short sea battle against South Vietnamese forces to take full control over the last remaining Vietnamese positions. Since then, China has consolidated control over the islands, built up a military garrison, and harassed or arrested Vietnamese fishermen who try to continue fishing there. The most likely purpose behind Vietnam's threat to litigate is to gain clarity about its resource rights and to develop leverage to stop Chinese interference so that Vietnam can move forward with exploration contracts for its offshore gas and oil deposits. But Chinese interference with resource exploitation is not a new challenge for Vietnam, nor is the domestic political pressure over Chinese interference with Vietnamese fishing. Both issues have been managed through diplomacy in the past. What makes this time different? Vietnam's threat to litigate comes amid ongoing multilateral negotiations involving the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, better known as ASEAN, and China over a code of conduct for the South China Sea. Negotiations on a code of conduct have been underway for 2 decades as an upgrade to an initial agreement. The Declaration of Conduct for Parties in the South China Sea that was seen as a stopgap measure when it was created in 2002. The parties may be close to a deal, and there is some suggestion that all sides are jockeying for position before finalizing an agreement that locks in a new status quo. To Vietnam, that status quo should provide it exclusive rights to the hydrocarbon resources under its continental shelf based on international law. This explains Vietnam's strategy, which involves confronting China at sea to protect its exclusive resource rights, publicly advancing the legality of Vietnam's stance and the lack of legal legitimacy for China's claim while maintaining multiple avenues open for diplomacy. Now you know why Vietnam is considering taking China to the international court. Continuing. In opening the possibility of litigation, Vietnam hopes to overcome these vulnerabilities by harnessing the court of international public opinion as much as the strength of international law. The Vietnamese understand that litigation would not be the end of the matter even if it wins. Persuading China to accept a South China Sea order based on law rather than raw power and its own history is a long game. If Vietnam challenges China in court, its purpose will be to increase the cost to Beijing of its intransigence. China needs stability in the South China Sea to pursue its long-term interest in developing a stable and reliable maritime component of its Belt and Road Initiative. If the Vietnamese win an international case over resource rights, China is likely to face many years of military and diplomatic pressure from the U.S., Japan, Australia, India, the United Kingdom, France, and other states that have already demonstrated willingness to provide active support to the international legal order in the South China Sea. Accordingly, it is possible that the mere threat to litigate will have a favorable effect on Vietnam's bilateral and multilateral negotiations with China. If not, following through with an international litigation might be Vietnam's best way to change unfavorable trends in the South China Sea. After listening to the case that Peter Dutton lays out, I would say this to Vietnam. What are you waiting for? Get that litigation started immediately. It looks like you've got plenty of grounds to sue. And something must be done to rein in the big bully over there in Eastern Asia. We don't want China taking over everything. The Vietnamese deserve to use their own resources without being harassed by the threatening Chinese. This is my opinion. It belongs to Vietnam. Let the Vietnamese have it. And I'm sticking by that opinion. Go for it. Vietnam to the International Court. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1805 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to listen to more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?